wonderful program in store for you today, but first I'd like to welcome Elizabeth Norman to the podium. Elizabeth is publisher of the Hartford Journal. It is her energy, commitment, and ability to inspire a creative and dynamic team that first created this great publication and sustains it to this day. Please join me in welcoming Elizabeth.
Thank you very much. This is just so exciting to be here. When we started this magazine, when we started talking about this magazine 7 years ago, we really thought, gosh, if we could get to 5 years, that would just be amazing, and then we could just, rest on our laurels. That would be enough. But so now that we're here at 5 years, I'm like, well, I don't know. There's a lot more great stories to tell. We can't stop now. So it's gone by in a flash. Every issue that comes out, to me, feels like a little miracle. You love them all. You nurtured every single one of them. It's always wonderful when people come up and say, oh, I just love that last issue, or I just love that story I read in the last issue. So I just thank you all so much for being here today, for being supporters of Hartford Journal, and continue to spread the word. It's a great joy and a great challenge to publish a small magazine. It requires a lot of people's support and input, so I just want to take a just brief few minutes to thank quite a few people, and I think it'll give you a sense that publishing something like this is a huge collaborative effort. Many people involved. I first want to thank Brenda Miller for organizing today's event. We're just thrilled to have the Hartford History Center open again and the collection coming back, particularly in our early issues. We relied heavily on this collection. It is an amazing collection of Hartford history. Since it was off-site while the building was being renovated, it was a little harder getting access, so we're looking forward to digging back into the collection here and sharing it with all of you. I definitely must thank the Hartford Journal team, Jennifer Huguet, our editor, who had a conflict and couldn't be here today, Diane Foley, our assistant publisher, who's in the back, John Ells, our art director, Cindy Cormier, who chairs our editorial board, David Corrigan, Mark Jones, Janice Matthews, Brenda Miller, and one of our newest members, Chris Pagliuco. We have a couple of ad hoc members, Mary Donahue and Wayne Ganaway. And this team gets together once a month at somebody's house. We brainstorm ideas, we network. We have a very wide network. We come up with story ideas. We try to find writers. A lot of people are now coming to us with story ideas, which is great. And we kind of vet those and decide. We have quite a few of our writers here in the audience, and thank you so much for bringing your story ideas to us. I want to thank our editorial board, which we have a couple of our members here today as well, and all of our organizational partners. This is published by Hartford Public Library and a group of a dozen or so nonprofit arts, heritage, and educational organizations in the state of Connecticut. And again, that's something that makes us unique, is that it is this big collaborative effort. And I want to finally thank Louise Blaylock, the chief librarian at Hartford Public Library, who amidst this amazing project of really bringing incredible new life to Hartford's main branch library, somehow found it in her heart or in her to-do list to take on a magazine of Connecticut history, which certainly at the time we launched this, everyone was saying, I don't know, if it was a good idea, someone else would have done it already. So she's the one who, there's certain people in this world who can just take on one more thing. And Louise is one of those people, and I can't thank her enough. So I want to also just thank Dr. Shaw for being here today and sharing his great stories with us. And certainly Hartford Journal is all about great Connecticut stories. And thank you very much.
I'd like to introduce Dr. Shaw. And I have to read it because his resume is so extensive, and I want to do him justice. Dr. Shaw, a public librarian, educator, and world expert on storytelling and library service to children, has returned to Connecticut from a distinguished nationwide career spanning more than 6 decades. A native of Hartford and the first African-American librarian to be hired at Hartford Public Library in 1941, Dr. Shaw went on to work at the Brooklyn Public Library, the Nassau County Library System in New York, and on the faculty of the University of Washington Graduate School of Library and Information Science, where he is named Professor Emeritus In 1992, he was awarded the honorary degree of Doctorate of Literature by the University of Wisconsin in Madison. Throughout his multifaceted career, Dr. Shaw has received national and international attention for his work in library service and has lectured worldwide on the arts of storytelling and reading aloud to children and adults. Extensively published in books and journals, he has given radio and television presentations as well as narrated films. His international commitments included presentations in Australia, where he is named an eminent American by the Australian-American Council, designated an American cultural specialist by the, I guess there's 2 pages, United States Information Service. He participated in New Zealand's 150th anniversary celebration in 1990. He has also lectured in Japan, Hong Kong, Canada, England, Cyprus, the Netherlands, South Africa, and Brazil. His many awards and honors include the Carnegie Corporation Fellowship for Graduate Study in Librarianship, the Distinguished Alumnus Awards from Hampton University in the School of Library and Information Studies, University of Wisconsin, Nordstrom's Cultural Diversity Award, American Library Association's Distinguished Service Award, Washington Library Association's President's Award, and Washington State Commission for the Humanities and the Washington State Library's the Nancy Blankenship Pryor Award. He is a juror for the National Book Award in Literature for Youth and is listed in the Who's Who in Library and Information Science and Who's Who among Black librarians. We are delighted to have Dr. Shaw with us today. Please join me in welcoming him home.
Thank you. It is a pleasure to be here this afternoon and to share in this wonderful observance. On behalf of the Connecticut Storytelling Center, which is in residence at Connecticut College, it's a pleasure to extend our congratulations and our best wishes to Elizabeth Norman, publisher, and the staff of the Hog River Journal on the 5th anniversary. Through its carefully researched and published articles, readers are offered opportunities to explore the rich Connecticut history in a wide variety of nutmeg tales. Such is the power of storytelling. I would also like to honor the reopening of the Hartford History Center under its manager, Brenda Miller. When I was invited to speak and going over as to what was to be done, I was asked to have my talk in 2 parts. The first would be related to storytelling as an art form, and lastly, my telling stories. I've entitled my talk, A Cross-Cultural Tapestry of Storytelling. During the annual conference of the Vermont Library Association, I was invited to participate with a presentation with their conference theme. And their conference theme was entitled, Bridging Oral Tradition and Technology Through Storytelling. In my preparation, I asked myself, what is one bridge that brings together the field of science with its component, technology, and the humanities and the arts with its component, storytelling? The bridge is communication. Through its channels, we transmit thoughts, opinions, anecdotes, ideas, information, concerns, and interests. How are these entities conveyed by a sender to a recipient? With the use of technology, the messages are transmitted through cyberspace with an array of electronic media in many mind-boggling formats. The messages are sent, they're answered either immediately or delayed. Now in this situation, the sender depends upon an intermediary, an electronic device, to establish any personal contact with recipients. Using the time-honored practice of oral communication, a storyteller depends solely within his own innate possession, creative artistry. The oral rendition of the message is supplemented, implemented, and enriched with the teller's facial expression, eye contact, gestures, body language, and posture, carefully blending these ingredients into a recognizable pattern. A storyteller establishes a close relationship with the recipient. There is no intermediary between the storyteller and the recipient. And throughout the historical periods of storytelling, storytellers from diverse cultures and separated geographically have adopted these universal techniques, which are traditional benchmarks in the field of communication. Sharing their gifts with eager audiences, storytellers have assumed many important roles in history. They've been historians, genealogists, recorders, priests, mediators, teachers, and entertainers. In diverse ethnic and cultural groups, storytellers, for example, in Germany, were the Meister singers. In France, the troubadours, and also the jugglers. In England, the bards, the minstrels, and the gleemen. In Ireland, the sharmakies. In the Scandinavian countries, the skalds. In Africa, the griots, and the Native Americans, shaman. These skilled practitioners of the ancient form of storytelling crisscrossed many lands, sharing their wealth of stories. And where do they go? Stately castles, impoverished lodges, tribal settings were among some of the locations which resounded with a wonderful response of listeners to the uniquely different forms and techniques used by tellers in sharing their tales. In his scholarly book, The Folktale, eminent folklorist Stig Thompson highlights the results of each craftsmanship upon the audience. This is what he says, I quote directly. The teller of stories has everywhere and always found eager listeners, whether his tale is the mere report of a recent happening, a legend of long ago, or an elaborately contrived fiction. Men and women have hung upon the words and satisfied their yearnings for information or amusement, for incitement to heroic deeds, for religious edification, or for the release from the overpowering monotony of their lives. In villages of Central Africa, in outrigger boats on the Pacific, in the Australian bush, and within the shadow of the Hawaiian volcanoes, tales of the past and the mysterious, of animals and heroes and gods, and of men and women like themselves, held interest in their spell or enriched the conversation of daily life. So it is also said in Eskimo igloos, under the light of seal oil lamps, in the tropical jungles of Brazil, and by the totem poles of the British Columbian coast. In Japan too, China and India, the priest, the scholar, the peasant, and the artisan all join in their love of a good story and their honor for the man who tells it well. Close quote. In this concept, the storytellers are the catalysts, sharing their verbal tales to help listeners fulfill some of their basic needs. And that is why one of the things we do when we tell stories today, these needs are universal in widely separated cultural groups. Looking into the contents of related stories as they are being told, listeners may discover and extract elements of truth that fulfill their desire for information, for incitement to heroic deeds, for religious enlightenment, amusement and as a release from the daily monotony of their lives. In the quoted excerpt by Smith Thompson, references were also made to an ever-expanding geographical boundaries where storytelling flourished. Brought by migrants of diverse ethnic groups, the art form acquired in time a multitude of cultural roots in its offerings. This was an outgrowth as individuals with different ethnic backgrounds intermingled in their respective communities. Through these daily contacts, they shared some of their traditions, ideas, values, verbal expressions, food, clothing, as we know today. Storytellers use these elements to permeate, to embellish the contents of related narratives, and from such resources, directly and indirectly, they acquired knowledge of cultural roots different from their own. And as a result, they began to develop a foundation of plurality of such groups. The key to this was perceptively stated at an Academy Awards ceremony by the president of the Academy Awards, when he said this: "For every culture of the world, storytelling is the connecting link." This connecting link of cultures by storytellers is our legacy here in America. From it, we weave rich tapestries of cross-cultural roots. Migrants from the old world brought their traditional tales to us: myths, fables, epics, Bible stories, hero tales, legends, and folk tales. Some of these stories, brought here in America, remain untouched, where the migrants in some communities were isolated or self-contained. In other situations, where they were repeated, the retellings of stories by different generations of tellers, the story content, characters, places, events, the style and language took on the flavor of the region where the stories were shared. Eventually, there emerged a wealth of stories that have become uniquely indigenous to America. Drawn from every region of our country, there is a treasure trove of Native American lore, with traditional expressions of Indian life and values. They are learning experiences from which wisdom flows, and they also stress a harmonious link between man and nature. African American stories include animal tales, haunt and preacher stories, master-slave anecdotes, conjure tales, trickster and exaggerated stories, epics, hero tales, legends, proverbs, and riddles. Adapted folk tales can best be retold and have been best been retold by Ray Hicks, a farmer and part-time mechanic living in Beach Mountain in North Carolina. Filled with rich mountain speech, grammar, and diction, unchanged since the 18th century, the stories are pure Southern Appalachian treasures. Some of these have been collected by Richard Chase in his two books, Grandfather Tales and Jack Tales. We also have in our country a unique type of story, the tall tales. We meet Pecos Bill, a Western cowboy, a legendary inventor of roping, branding, and other skills. We have Joe Majorak, a brawny Hungarian steelworker who could squeeze out steel rails with his fingers. We had Paul Bunyan, the great lumberjack, who became famous for his strength and legendary logging feats. Other entries in our acute American folklore. We had stories known as whoppers, screams, supernatural and ghost stories, jokes, numbskull tales, narratives of pirates and desperados. Our culture is also enriched with our own stories. When you and I begin our personal narratives in our home environments, we have unwritten stories about our towns and some of their landmarks. Not too far from here is a street called Gold Street. This is what is read. A little further down Main Street, we come to the center church. Behind it is a cemetery where lie buried many of Hartford's illustrious dead. On the south side of this granny street known as Gold Street, a menace to the town. It was filled with gambling dens, lottery shops, saloons, pawn shops, and all sorts shops and entrances that led them literally into the sink of iniquity. This is from Hartford Looking Up, a walking tour. We also found in our local history of people, historical events, cultural festivals and observances, stories related to our natural surroundings, waterways, plant, animal, and aquatic life. Fortunately, you and I have resources for researching and from this research to find stories and tell them to appreciative audiences. We have, as had already been mentioned, the Hartford History Center, the Connecticut Historical Society, the Connecticut State Library, and the Hart River Journal. These cherished gifts from our heritage are given to us to preserve and to perpetuate through storytelling and old art forms. And in the words of Carl Kammer, folklorist, this is what he said: knowledge of a nation's folklore is knowledge of the creative workings of the people of its folk. It is a key to a nation's values, a highway that leads into the hearts of the people. Let us continue to weave cross-cultural tapestries through storytelling. Now I'm going to have you have a chance to participate. I have a little book here called Tomfoolery, Trickery and Foolery with Words, Collected American Folklore by Alvin Schwartz. You and I are going to tell a story. And when you tell a story, you use good expression, and you also try to visualize images in your mind. This is a story. And in this story, there are two things you'll have to do. When my hands go up, you will say, "Oh, that's good." Let me hear you.
Oh, that's good.
Oh, come on. Let's try it once more.
Oh, that's good.
And my hands can I say, "Oh, that's bad."
Oh, that's bad.
No, here we go. Good voice, good projection, no swinging. One day, two pilots were up in the airplane, and the airplane had a very good engine.
Oh, that's good.
No, that's bad. The engine did not work.
Oh, that's bad.
No, that's good. The pilots had parachutes.
Oh, that's good.
Though that's bad, the parachutes did not open.
Oh, that's bad.
Though that's good, there was a haystack under the pirates.
Oh, that's good.
Though that's bad, there was a pitchfork sticking up in the hay.
Oh, that's bad.
Though that's good, they missed the pitchfork.
Oh, that's good.
Though that's bad, they missed the haystack. One summer, I had the pleasure of being invited to teach in summer school at the University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana. And while I was there, I had an opportunity to meet a member of the history department. Her name was Natalia Belton. She wrote several books, and they're all uniquely tied in to nature. In this book, called Calendar Moon, for each month of the year, she has a particular poem coming from some particular culture of the world. Since this is January, she has the most appropriate story that I recommend as an introduction to my program of storytelling. This is what is written for January. The mountain passes are deep in snow. The forests are battered by the winds. The timber cracks with the frost. Ice stretches out from the riverbanks, tries to hold the running water. The salmon are gone back to the sea. The trout sleep beneath the cold. Men keep to their lodges. They tell the tales of their fathers. They count the moons from the time of the wild berry picnic, from the first moon of the year. Now, to give you the last verse, this is what you can do. They count the moons on their fingers, and they name them. Tuck the thin thumb into the palm. Bend down the first finger, then the second. They hold the third finger and give its name to the moon. They say, this is the moon of the Little Fingers Pot. This is from the Klamath Indians of the northwestern United States. Calendar Moon and the Natalia Belton. Now then, when I was asked to include stories in my program, after 60 years you wonder which one you would tell. At the World Congress of the International Reading Association in Hong Kong, I received a letter from the President of the Association asking if I would come to present an evening of storytelling in the grand ballroom of the Conference Hotel. Hong Kong, yes. So we had a wonderful time, and among the stories that we told was a Chinese story entitled The Dinner That Cooked Itself, or in other words, White Wave. This is how the story was told. One of the most difficult quests a young man faces is to find a girl who will marry him, become his wife, and together they may live happily. But there are many obstacles which have to be overcome before the quest can succeed. And thus it was in the ancient days of China for Tuan, a handsome young man of 19. He was a clerk in a magistrate's office. And because of his honesty and his bearing, he was liked by all who knew him. When he was very small, Tuan's parents had died, and he was brought up under the care of the elderly neighbors, the Wangs, who treated him as if he were their only son. When he reached the age as a young adult, Tuan moved out into a cottage of his own. There in a nearby field, he planted a small garden, which he would tend after his day's work in the magistrate's office. Now, as was the custom, it was time for Tuan to find himself a wife. And so it was, the elderly Wang asked someone to act as a go-between. The go-between went first to the home of a rich farmer just outside the village gate. The farmer had a beautiful daughter, and the go-between asked if she could be a wife to Tuan. But when it was learned that she was born in the year of the mouse, and Tuan was born in the year of the dog, since dog and mouse couldn't live together in the house, the marriage would not succeed. She then went to go-between, then went to another house. But when it was learned that the young maiden, the Chinese characters in her name spelled wood, and in Tuan's name, it spelled earth. Well, wood could be turned into a plow, and the plow could dig up the earth, which would mean Tuan could never be a master in his house. And so it went. Wherever the go-between went, no one would be willing to have their daughter married Tuan. They said, he is too poor. Tuan did not worry. One night, after his work in the magistrate's office, Tuan worked in his garden, tending the rice and the vegetables. But alas, he worked longer than usual, and it was growing dark when he started on his way back to his cottage with a hoe over his shoulder. As Tuan was walking along, suddenly he stopped. He saw something white in the path. He went close. He looked. It wasn't a stone. And as he knelt down further, he could see that it was a snail, a moon snail. And wonder of wonders, it was still alive. Very carefully, Tuan picked up the snail, carried it back to his cottage, and placed it just inside the door in a large earthenware basin. Then he went out. He gathered a few succulent leaves and brought them in. The next morning, when Tuan went off to the magistrate's office, he first looked into the jar. The leaves were gone. He picked some more, and off he went to work. That night, when Tuan returned from his work, great was his surprise when he entered his cottage. He found his table was set. There was a bowl of steaming rice and vegetables. Tuan wondered, how could this be? And nearby there was a basin filled with warm water for him to wash. He looked around. He went outside. No one was there. He sat down. He began to eat. And as he ate, he thought, it must be the Wangs. So after eating, he hurried to the cottage of the Wangs. But they said they had not been there. The next night, when Tuan returned home, there again, his table was set, hot steaming rice, little pork rolls, and a vase with the stem of a wild peach. Again, as he plied his chopsticks to the food, he suddenly thought, it must be the daughter of the rich farmer. Again, he hurried off. But when he confronted her, she listened and she said, oh, Tuan, no, it is not I. You already have a wife, but are hiding it for the rest of us. Each day, the same thing happened. And soon, word spread in the village as to what was occurring, but no one knew how. Tuan decided that he would find out. One morning, at the crowing of the cock at dawn, he started to walk, but then he circled back to his house. Peering behind a fence, he waited. And as the first rays of dawn came down and touched the roof of the cottage, Tuan saw, to his great surprise, coming from the basin in which the snail had been placed, a small hand and arm coming up, and then another one. And before his astonished eyes, there leaped into the room the most beautiful maiden dressed in a silk robe. And as she walked around the room, it burst with radiant of light, and her dress, it changed colors from silver, white, and gold. Although no one told him, Tuan knew she must be a goddess. And though no one told him, he knew no mortal could ever lay eyes on a mortal, on a goddess from heaven. Every day, Tuan went off to work. When he would come home, the meal was on the table, the house was clean. And as he went about his work, he was filled with great joy. Each day, he would stop and watch the maiden come out of the shell. And one day as he looked, he forgot what he must not do. He had a strong urge to stroke her beautiful hand. Suddenly, without warning, Tuan burst into the room. Instantly, the maiden shrank back against the wall. Stop! Do not come any closer. Who are you? Where did you come from? Why are you working for me? I am White Wave, a moon goddess. The Lord of the heavens has sent me down to care for you for 10 years until you could find a wife. But now I must leave. For as you know, no mortal may lay eyes upon a heavenly being. Please, don't go, I beg of you. Please, do not go. I must count to 5. Tuan began to count. 1. White Wave walked across the room to the door. 2. Here is my shell, she said. If ever you are in need, raise it and say, White Wave, White Wave, I need you. 3. There was a streak of lightning and a clap of thunder. 4. Suddenly a gust of wind swept White Wave out of the cottage, up into the heavens. 5. A torrent of rain cascaded down. Tuan rushed out. He looked up, drenched by the water. But White Wave had gone. Tuan came back into the cottage. The shell was empty. In the days that followed, Tuan wondered, what can I do to bring back White Wave? I will build a shrine. And so it was. Every day after his work in the magistrate's office, instead of tending to his garden, Tuan looked for beautiful rocks with which to build the shrine. And as he worked on the shrine, his crops were not tended to. And in time, the crops failed. Tuan ate what he had, then he ate that which he had in storage, until at last, nothing was left but birds and wild grass. One night, weak with hunger, Tuan stumbled into his cottage, and as he did, his foot hit the earthen jar, and out tumbled the shell. Remembering White Wade's words, he picked it up. Holding it high, he said, "White Wade! White Wade! I need you!" Instantly, from the shell, there came a flow of white rice, strong and sturdy, enough for the next harvest. Tuan fingered that, and that was the last time he ever had to call for white wheat, for he always had plenty. Tuan, with his great strength, tended his garden, and in time he married. He had children, and he told them about white wheat. And as the children listened, they held the shell in their hands. And then in the morning, then in the evening, they would climb up the hill to the temple and the shrine which had now been completed. But they never saw white wheat. And so it was, time passed, and as it is with all, it was time for Tuan to depart this life. And when he had gone, the shell was lost, the temple disappeared, nothing was left but the story. That's the way it is. When we go, nothing is left but the story. I would like to conclude a trip into the world of stories with this one, which is a modern American story. Today we hear so much in the newspaper, radio, television, from politicians, from people about immigrants and immigration. It so happened that there was a branch librarian here in Hartford. At that time, we were located on Main Street opposite Bikini Tower with a storefront. I mean a storefront. And one day there came to my desk a book which had a story in it that I liked. This particular story was found in the book. Consider the date, because this is what we also have problems back at this time. This was a book entitled "This Way to Unity for the Promotion of Goodwill, Teamwork among Racial, Religious, and National Groups." The Oxford Book Company, 1945. This also dates me. The story is called "When the Aliens Left." One day we were talking to our neighbor in our community. He was an Italian-American who happened to have been born in Italy, but he had become a naturalized citizen. A steady worker in a munitions plant in Bridgeport. He had 2 sons in the military, and a third who was slated to go. Most of his friends and neighbors were also Italian-Americans, but some, either through accident or by negligence, had failed to become citizens. Yet, they were giving of the sinews in their sons in the military. Despite all of this, our neighbor complained that they were all grouped together as aliens, undesirable foreigners by a few strident Yankee patriots. And he was most bitter when he spoke about a few congressmen and some newspaper writers who formulated about America for Americans. We left our friend, and that night we returned to our home. And there, we had a dream. And in our dream, we saw one of these newspaper reporters writing his column for the next day's paper. His name is George Spelman Sr. And as he was writing, he put down his pen, drew the lamp to him, he wrote it, and in our dream, a genie appeared. What is thy will, O master? It is my will that all these aliens, these undesirable foreigners, be sent into exile to some far distant inhospitable spot and there do sufferance for their sins. Master, I will obey your will. But first, there is a law in our land that whoever is sent into exile may take that which they have created by their own will. It is a just law. And if you believe in it, I will carry out your desire. It is indeed a just law. But what have these people brought to our country? Nothing but plots, deceit, racketeering, radical heresies, sins and sabotage, and to these they are welcome. The genie sadly shook his head and then uttered a few words of magic. And instantly, in every port, every harbor, there were barges, ships, vessels of all description, and coming into the vessels were millions of undesirable foreigners and aliens, bringing with them that which they had created. They brought with them highways hewn out of the woods by the Sicilians and the Slavs. They took with them rafts of lumber cut by the Swedes, the Norwegians, the French, and the Irish. They brought millions of acres of land made fertile by the Dutch, the Danes, the Germans, the Swiss, the African Americans, the Japanese Americans, the Mexican Americans. They took with them hundreds of garments woven by the Jews, the Chinese, the Puerto Ricans, the Cubans, the Haitians. They brought tons of coal dug from the bowels of the earth by the Russians, the Finns, the Poles, and the Italians. They brought also their cities with their skyscrapers, their malls and their subways, their railroads, their schools and their universities, the religious institutions and the libraries, the art galleries and the museums, the sports arenas and the amusement parks. Yes, they brought with them also the medical centers, the space and science centers, and again, they brought also the military posts, the naval stations, the government buildings, their courts, their businesses, their industries, their banking, all those things which they had created when America sent to the four corners of the world, urging immigrants to come to her shores to help make her great. And they also took their culture and their customs, their languages, their books, their literature, their religious beliefs, their art, their music, their dance, their songs. They took also their piety and passions, their ideals and values. They took their cookery and their humor. All of those things that helped to make America. And when all had gone, slowly, a deep, frightening silence settled over the land. And in that silence, naught could be heard but the whimpering, frightened voice of George Spelman Sr., who looked up, found himself surrounded by Native Americans who looked down curiously at him. And as he looked up, he saw a land empty of highways, of forests, of farmland, of cities, of mines. And as he looked, frightened, fearful, he called out, "Genie! Genie!" But there was no answer. For the genie, you see, an alien, had been put on a boat and transported to Baghdad. And after that, there was nothing. And a mantle of darkness covered all. And it was night. In the words of Anna Louise Daddy, I close with these words. Our country is a tapestry woven by loving hands, by faith and hope, was brought from other lands, and each retains its beauty anew, whose beauty animates a varied pattern, lovely new, our own United States, weaving a rich tapestry, cross-cultural, through storytelling. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. This is a delightful program. Thank you, Dr. Shaw. It's a pleasure to have you here. Please enjoy the reception. We have wonderful things going on in the library. We have jazz going on downstairs. We have a kinetic wall display. We have the 20 covers of the Hog River Journal up if you want to familiarize yourself with some of those great stories. And again, Dr. Shaw, thank you so much for being here. Dr. Shaw has brought posters. They're in back under the glass on the map cases. They're wonderful. Please go by, take a look. His own personal collections in the glass cases over here, and he has pulled some from our collection here from our Youth and Family Services room. So please, enjoy. Thank you.